When my fellow classmates and I were first inquired to introduce our honored guest today, I could not help but catch Dr. Huwaida al-Harithy's profession amidst all the others. A profession used so widely, suiting all of our conveniences. A profession so complex and detailed, fitting our lifestyles, our comforts, and yes, even our own designs. Architecture. Centuries ago, since the Romans, the Greeks, and even the Egyptians before them, architecture was born. But what mostly distinguishes Dr. al-Harithy's studies of architectural history and design developed during and after receiving her PhD in art history at Harvard University in 1992, where she researched in Islamic art and architecture, mainly focusing on the Mamluk period between 1258 and 1517. She published numerous articles on Oxford Bulletin of the School of Oriental and African Studies, the Muqarnas, and the Mamluk Studies Review, which also includes one of her biggest achievements, the Harvard Middle Eastern and Islamic Review. In addition to all of this, she operated in her role as the chair of the Department of Architecture and Design not so far back between 2003 and 2006. She is now a well-respected and committed professor of architecture at the American University of Beirut in Lebanon, where she shared her profound knowledge upon generations of young men and women in studios in architecture and urban design, as well as courses in art and architectural history and theory only 2 years after her graduation since 1994. Her most recent studies spotlights on urban heritage and conservation featured in current articles in which she published in volume 17 of the Journal of the International Association for the Study of Traditional Environments. And now, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Huwaida al-Harithy.
Thank you very much for a very kind introduction. I will take you to the streets of Cairo this morning and talk about sabils or sabil kutabs. Salsabils, shadurwans, and fasqiyas, in elaborate designs of multicolored marble stones, adorned iwans, qa'as, and courtyards of palaces and religious institutions in Mamluk Cairo. But the conception of water, as manifested in Mamluk architecture, did not revolve around such decorative water features largely within the private domain or around their iconographic references to paradise. The central conception of water was rather manifested in architecture of the public domain and the very earthly and practical function of siqaya. In the rapidly growing city of Cairo during the Mamluk era, water supply was a central occupation in the most pragmatic of senses. Water supply projects were a major component of the process of urbanization in Cairo, whose population is estimated to have reached 500,000 during the 14th century. Large-scale projects concerned with the implementation of water supply systems included digging of canals and the building of aqueducts, intake towers, and water wheels. And Nasser Muhammad was a major patron of such large urban services projects that responded to the urbanization process, especially since the most phenomenal growth of Cairo occurred under his third reign, which stretched between 1310 and 1341. He built the aqueducts to supply the citadel of Cairo with water in 1340 and also built canals to supply areas far from the Nile with water. The aqueducts were rebuilt again and expanded by Sultan al-Ghuri in 1507 and remained in use until 1872 when they were replaced by a modern system. Within the frame of such grand civic projects, the concept of siqaya emerged as a charitable action for which special structures or sabils were built and endowed. So throughout the talk, when I speak about sabils, I'm not speaking about the simple act of providing water, but as the architectural building type. The provision of free drinking water to the thirsty in mosques, madrasas, and other public facilities was a major act of charity, part of which was offering water to the general public. The other part was to travelers or pilgrims in their way to Mecca. Sabils, therefore, were an important part of the water supply network and public service. Their numbers multiplied during the Mamluk period after their initial emergence in the early 14th century, and as the waqfs were widespread as a popular mean to protect one's income from confiscation. They were not, however, purely pragmatic and without symbolic, political, or aesthetic signification. On the one hand, the act of building sabils dedicated to offer water to the thirsty was a most charitable act by the wealthy as an expression of their pious intentions and as a fulfillment of their religious duty. On the other, sabils became an integral part of Mamluk patronage and design agendas. In this paper, I will identify the role of sabils in Mamluk Cairo as architectural and urban units, and I will argue their significance in what Humphrey has identified as the expressive intent of Mamluk architecture. Numerous sabils were built in Cairo during the Mamluk and the following Ottoman period, after their initial appearance in the first half of the 14th century. Ali Pasha Mubarak recorded the presence of over 200 Mamluk and Ottoman sabils in Cairo in the 18th century. Medieval sources, of course, refer to them as Hawd al-Sabil, Sabil Kuttab, or Maktab al-Sabil. During the 14th century, sabils transformed from simple, modest features, such as basins and fountains, to elaborate and sophisticated architectural and urban interventions. The earliest surviving sabil in Cairo is the Sabil of Al-Nasir Muhammad. It was actually attached to the complex of his father, Qalawun, on Al-Mu'izz Street in the heart of the old city and along its ceremonial route. This was in 1326. It replaced an older simple basin where animals were provided with water. It's an L-shaped arcade that runs around the northeastern corner of the madrasa structure of the complex and features an octagonal base of a dome that no longer survives. This is the location of the first sabil. This sabil is an important step in the evolution of sabils into independent urban structures and even domed freestanding sabils, as in the case of the sabil of Qait Bey, not in Cairo, but in Jerusalem. The other early example in Cairo is the sabil of Al-Amir Shaykhu in 1344. This is an independent structure and was most likely built on a site of an older cistern. It's located at the foot of the citadel of Cairo on the Royal Road leading to the city and from the city to its northern suburbs. It provided water to travelers entering the city as well. The religious inscriptions are of interest here. They refer to the notion of siqaya, using quotations primarily from the hadith. The inscription carved on the niche of the facade cites the following hadith. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في كل ذات كبد حرة أجرى. Another citation وسئل صلى الله عليه وسلم أي الأفضال الأعمال أفضل قال سقي الماء, the provision of water as the most meritorious of acts. The sabil is the second to be constructed in Cairo and challenges the argument that sabils gradually grew as more independent structures from religious institutions and became detached urban landmarks. In the madrasa of Sultan Sha'ban, dated to 1368, located on Bab al-Wazir, a sabil was joined by a kuttab for the first time. but they were not yet stacked. They flanked the main portal. The sabil is located on the corner of the building to the left of the portal, featuring a large window with a wooden screen of geometric patterns, while the kuttab is located on the right side of the portal in the form of an arcaded loggia built over a drinking basin for the animals. Following the typology of inscriptions in Mamluk foundations, we find on the wall of the sabil a foundation inscription in this case, along with the religious one. It reads as follows: "The building of this blessed sabil was ordered by our master As-Sultan al-Malik al-Ashraf Sha'ban ibn Hussein, may God bless his victory, for his mother in the months of the year 770. Though there is a foundation inscription on the grand portal of the funerary complex, adjacent to the sabil, on the portal adjacent to the sabil, an independent foundation inscription is dedicated in this case to the sabil, which is indicative of the degree to which sabils were seen as particular structures and independent in their function and typology. The first composition of a sabil kuttab as a single architectural unit appeared in the Mosque of Aqsumqor in 1346 in Bab al-Wazir. But it's no longer extant. The earliest surviving example is shown here from the Madrasa of Al-Amir al-Jay al-Yusufi, dating to 1373. And it occupies the end corner of the building, which is shown here with the sabil on the ground floor and the loggia of the kuttab on top. On the main facade, to the left side of the portal, this early example where the sabil and kuttab are twinned into a single architectural unit with the sabil on the ground floor and the kuttab on the upper formed an open loggia. It's an adjustment to earlier practices of locating the sabil and the kuttab on the street facade but independent of each other, as in the case we saw of the madrasa of Sultan Sha'ban. This arrangement becomes the norm, and it gets canonized in Mamluk buildings that follow. As in the sabil of Al-Nasir Muhammad, the sabil is always located at the corner of the building whenever possible. And in this case, it's this corner. This is practical in terms of expression and access on both streets, and in terms of higher ventilation to keep the water cooler. Whenever possible, sabils actually occupied the northeastern side of the building to provide maximum shade and coolness. During the second half of the 14th century, the standard architectural formula emerges and is repeated, as in the example shown here of the sabil of Inal al-Yusufi in Khiyamiya, dated to 1393. The formula is repeatedly used with variations throughout the 15th century, as in this case of Al-Ashraf Barspai from 1425, and again located on the ceremonial avenue of Al-Mu'izz. The sabil and kuttab are joined to compose a recognizable architectural unit with the sabil on the ground level and the kuttab above it. The kuttab, being a Quran school for the orphans, forms a perfect twin of the charitable act. The kuttab is therefore called in some medieval sources Maktab al-Sabil. The architectural unit occupies the corner of the religious institution, whose external expression becomes more and more distinct from the treatment of the rest of the building facade, both in terms of fenestration and decoration, as illustrated by the two examples I am showing here of Qijmas al-Ishaqi of 1479 in Ad-Darb al-Ahmar and Azbak al-Yusufi dated to 1494 on Saliba Street. The shubbak or shubbaks are relatively bigger than other fenestrations on the facade with a stone masbala. That's the ledge that water is served through. The exterior walls are covered with decorated marble panels surmounted by a wooden loggia of the Kuttab, composed of 2 or 3 arched openings. The interior floor and dado of the sabil are covered with multicolored marble, often composed of geometric patterns. The ceiling is carved and colored and often gilded. In some sabils, we find the salsabil and shajarwan in reference to the heavenly garden, combined with a basin where the water is collected so as to become cool before it is served. Sabils were also constructed as part of Sufi complexes in the cemetery, which was being urbanized at that time. They provided drinking water for the public that frequented the cemetery to visit tombs of venerated sheikhs who are buried there. The Hanka of Sultan Faraj ibn Barquq, dated to 1400, in the northern cemetery contains 2 sabils. They are attached to the complex, one flanking the northern portal on its western corner and the other flanking the southern portal on its western corner. Though this is not an urban foundation inserted into the dense urban fabric of the old city, it utilizes and geometrically perfects the custom of combining the sabil with the kuttab in association with the main portal on the corner of the building as the architectural composition has developed. The architectural typology is the standard one by the turn of the 15th century of the corner square sabil hanut with 2 grilled shubbaks on each exposed side, surmounted by a square loggia for the kuttab to the left side of the muqarnas portal, rising the height of the building. This particular institution, built on an open site, had the freedom to modify and innovate this relationship in a planning scheme that is not restricted by the urban context, but opted to reiterate the one developed in urban dense Cairo. This testifies to the canonization by the end of the 14th century of the sabil as an architectural formula. Sabils were supported by the endowment of the religious institution, or waqf, to which they are attached in terms of operation and maintenance. Historical accounts and surviving waqfiyas provided us with an idea of their management. Each sabil, or hanut al-sabil, has an underground stone cistern, or sahrij, that is cleaned and filled annually, and a caretaker called the muzammilati, who often lived in an apartment attached to the sabil. He is the individual in charge of transporting the water to the sabil, running it, and distributing it to the people. At times, he's also placed in charge of cleaning the sabil and doing the maintenance work within it. This is indicated by the surviving waqfiyas, such as that of Sultan al-Ghuri, which stipulated the following. The Muzammilati is also responsible for hanging the 2 covers or awnings over the shubbaks of the forementioned sabil, the Bahri and western one during the summer when the sun hits them, dusting, folding, and storing them each day upon sunset. He is to clean the marble and the dahliz by sweeping and wiping all the time. And the quotation goes on, but I end here. Many waqfiyas require that the muzammilati be a strong and healthy individual and that the water is brought from a clean, uncontaminated source. Water was transported from the Nile on camelback to the city, divided into smaller units and then distributed by the saqqas. Some sabils were open for specific hours while others were open all day. The waqfiyya of Sultan Faraj ibn Barquq stipulates that the sabil is to be open between sunrise and sunset during regular months and between sunset and the time of the sahur during the month of Ramadan. The concept of siqaya, or provision of drinking water, was a pious deed that was not limited to sabils. It extended to include muzammilas within religious institutions for which waqfs were also provided. This ensured full service, including the cost of water, transporting it, building the storage tank, and paying for the caretaker. An example is found in the Waqfiyya of Al-Amir Sirghitmish, which stipulated that, and I quote, "The Nazir will spend from the above-mentioned endowment the cost of transporting drinking water from the blessed Nile each day to the above-mentioned mizyara." Mizmala and mizyara are used interchangeably. For the drinking of the residents of the mentioned madrasa and visitors. Muzammalas, therefore, or mizyaras for the provision of drinking water were located inside the buildings for their own users. The name refers to the water pot and the space dedicated for its location. It comes from the root zammala, meaning to cover, in reference to covering or wrapping the water pot with wet white cloth to keep it cool. Mizyaras, on the other hand, are in reference to the zir, which is the clay water pot that contains the water. So the architectural space takes on the name of these particular items in reference to a closed niche within the building. It's usually located in the dahliz leading to the sahan or durqa'a of the building. In the mosque of Al-Mu'ayyad Sheikh on Al-Mu'izz Street near Bab Zuwayla, dating to 1416, a mizyara is located behind the main portal through the right door of the durqa'a in the corridor leading to the Iwan, which is a very most common place for their location. They take the form of it. I'm sorry, I don't have a picture, so this is just for your visual pleasure. They take the form of a deep arched recess in the wall that reaches the height of the room where drinking water is stored. It is covered halfway up by a wooden screen for ventilation and has a door for service. It is ventilated to keep the water cool, either using a malqaf in the form of a shubbak at the top, or located in a well-ventilated space, such as across from a window in the Mosque of Al-Mu'ayyad Sheikh, for example, or within a wind corridor, as in the example of Al-Zahir Barquq Madrasa on Al-Mu'izz Street. Inscriptions on mizyaras are also important to record. They are either Quranic with references to the notion of water. I left my daughter behind, so this is really weird. They are either Quranic with references to the notion of water in paradise or signatures by the craftsmen. On the door of the Muzammala in Madrasat Qait Bay in the cemetery, verses from chapter 83 or Surah Al-Mutaffifin is inscribed. There are two verses are inscribed, and I'll read them in Arabic. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسقون من رحيق مختوم ختامه مسك وفي ذلك فليتنافس المتنافسون. It translates to, their thirst will be slaked with pure wine, sealed. The seal thereof will be of musk. That's the first verse. Also commonly found are verses from Surah Al-Insan or chapter 76 that also makes references to paradise. And they read, إن الأبرار يشربون من كأس كان مزاجه كافورا. And many of the examples will cite the next verse, but I will go on from here. In the Madrasa of Al-Ashraf Barspai on Al-Mu'izz Street, dating to 1425, as one enters the Durqa'a, one finds to the left side a door that leads to the Sabil, which has a marble mosaic floor and a gilded wooden ceiling, as now is the custom. The right side door, however, leads to a corridor in which a mizyara is located and cites the full Quranic inscription from Surah Al-Insan. That reads, إن الأبرار يشربون من كأس كان مزاجه كافورا عينا يشرب بها عباد الله يفجرونها تفجيرا يوفون بالنذر ويخافون يوما كان شره مستطيرا. This is the most commonly repeated verse or verses in mizyaras. An example, however, of the signature by a craftsman is found in the Jami' of Qusun, dating to 1330. There is a muzammila to the left side of the portal on which a Kufic inscription reads as follows. This is the work of Ahmad al-Hariri in the year 785. During the reign of Qaitbay, which extended between 1468 and 1496, the architectural style of the Sarkisian period in general matured much like the Bahri Mamluk style matured during the third reign of Al-Nasir Muhammad between 1310 and 1341. If during the time of Al-Nasir Muhammad, the elements, composition, and style were introduced, during this period, there was a refinement of the architecture to a greater emphasis on decorative programs, which reached a climax in stone carving motifs and techniques as applied to the exterior of monuments, such as minarets, portals, domes, and sabils. This is illustrated by the sabils founded by Sultan Qaitbay himself throughout Cairo, which give us the freestanding independent Sabil Kuttab as an urban landmark. So let me take you through the examples of Sultan Qaitbay to see how the sabils continued to evolve. This is the funerary complex of Sultan al-Ashraf Qaitbay, dating to 1473 in the Eastern Cemetery. It contains two sabils endowed by the Sultan as they were integrated into the complex. One is a Sabil Kuttab located on the main southern facade to the left of the main vaulted portal. And this is the Sabil Kuttab here. It occupies the corner of the building. The other is near the secondary entrance. There is also a muzammila inside the building in the main dahliz. The entrance to the Sabil Kuttab is from the Durqa'a, and its interior is decorated with a gilded wooden ceiling and contains the Quranic inscription as combined with the foundation inscription. It reads, again, it's a quotation from Surah Al-Insan that follows the basmala and goes on to cite إِنَّ الْأَبْرَارَ يَشْرَبُونَ مِنْ كَأْسٍ كَانَ مِزَاجُهُ كَافُورًا till the end of the two verses. I'll translate that. Surely the righteous shall drink of a cup, the admixture of which is camphor, a fountain from which the servants of Allah shall drink. They make it to flow, a good flowing forth. They fulfill vows and fear the day, the evil of which shall be spreading far and wide. End of quote. But this is also followed or combined with a foundation inscription that reads, the building of this blessed Sabil was ordered by our master Sultan al-Ashraf Abu Nasr Qaitbay, the one with charitable and good deeds. And this I will refer back to later. There's also a door to the right side of the Durqa'a leading to a corridor at the end of which there is a mizyara behind a wooden screen, as is the custom now. It has a Kufic inscription that says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. Its door has the following inscription from Surah Al-Mutaffifin. يسقون من رحيق مختوم ختامه مسك وفي ذلك فليتنافس المتنافسون. Again. The other Sabil, which is a bit later, the Sabil of Qaitbay, dated to 1479 or 80, on Saliba Street below the citadel, is considered as the culminating point of the evolution of Sabils in Mamluk Cairo, since it presents us with the construction of the first freestanding building devoted entirely to the function of Sabil Kuttab. It is lavishly decorated on all of its four facades with polychrome marble inlay and carved stone, and has its own recessed groin-vaulted tri-lobed portal on the western facade. As in the previous examples, to the left side of the portal is the Sabil proper. And here we go. located in the corner of the building with the shubbak on either side that features an iron-grilled treatment. Each is crowned by a double-tiered slab articulated with inlaid white and blue marble composing variations of the arabesque designs. A contemporary of the Sabil of Qaitbay, the Mosque of Al-Amir Qijmas al-Ishaqi of 1481, located in Darb al-Ahmar quarter, presents us with a Sabil Kutab that is in this case built across the street north of the mosque as an independent structure, a slide of which I'm sorry I don't have. This treatment was due to the highly irregular narrow triangular site and the building of the mosque above existing shops. Such urban constraints are important to deal with. The dense fabric has in many occasions dictated that urban complexes be composed of two separate structures on either side of the street, as in the complex of the famous Amir Shaykho complex on Saliba Street, with the mosque madrasa on one side and the Hanka on the other. This resolved the constraints, but also offered a very important opportunity for buildings to have greater facade surface area for the expression of their content. My last example is the Madrasa and Khanka of Sultan al-Ghuri, dating to 1503. It's located, again, along the ceremonial avenue of Al-Mu'izz Street. It's a funerary complex that was built on either side of the street, with the madrasa on the western side and the Khanka on the eastern. The Sabil Kutab is part of the Khanka structure and occupies the most visible corner of the building. And it's right here. This is Al-Mu'izz Street. It projects outward with three sides, each of which contains a large window. The foundation inscription is in Kufic and located above the door on either side and reads as follows. After the Basmala, the building of this blessed Sabil was ordered by our Lord As-Sultan Qansul Ghuri, may his victory be complete, during the glorious month of Ramadan of the year 909. Followed by the Salah. So to synthesize, we therefore have three types of inscriptions found on Sabils and Muzammalas: foundation inscriptions, signatures by craftsmen, and religious inscriptions, both Quranic and Hadith. The reference to water is dual. One references water of the heavenly gardens, and the second references the dutiful and charitable act of siqaya, the provision of drinking water to the thirsty. By way of summary, I will also allow a summation of the evolution process. From their early appearance, Sabils were destined to acquire a significant role in the making of Cairean urban architecture. Sabils that were initially attached to religious institutions evolved to be integrated into the design of mosques, madrasas, and khankas. They also evolved gradually into a distinct architectural unit as an urban landmark located in critical and highly visible urban junctions. Stylistically, they evolved into lavishly decorated facades. If we add to all of this the fact that they were concentrated in their locations along major ceremonial avenues such as Al-Mu'izz or Saliba roads, it becomes clear that Sabils during the Mamluk period were therefore not limited to fulfilling their primary function of providing water, but went beyond to celebrate their patrons and convey their messages. I'm concluding, therefore, by arguing that Sabils were operative in the production of social space in Cairo and in conveying the expressive intent of Mamluk architecture. It has already been established in the scholarship, and I'm referring to Stephen Humphrey's work, that the composition of narrow urban facades in Cairo created a visual grouping of the portal, dome, and minaret as three elements operative in the expression of the building and in revealing its content. I'm adding the Sabil Kutab to this grouping and composition of 4 visually, functionally, and symbolically dominant features in Mamluk foundations. As we see here in the foundation of Qaitbay, where the Sabil Kutab, portal, minaret, and dome are all concentrated on the narrow facades at the end of the vista. It has also been, In my earlier study of the concept of space in Mamluk architecture, I have argued that Mamluk buildings, having been urban inserts, reveal a masterful urban design scheme that created dynamic, transparent, and interactive facades that are visually and spatially animated. An example is the expanded window cell of madrasas, in which Quran readers are often seated to recite the Quran and, of course, pray for the Sultan at the end and opening of each chapter, as required by the waqfiyas of each foundation. This reference to the founder is reiterated again by the textual inscriptions on facades of individual architectural units of the building. The Sabils, therefore, and I'm closing, are active within this conception of space, which it intertwines with the conception of siqaya. They offered buildings active units where interior-exterior relationships are reinterpreted and where edges are dissolved. Building and street corners become one and form an urban landmark of a junction charged with function and references. Given the questionable legitimacy of the Mamluk rulers, it's important to see that these evoke less images of paradise and more images and future memories of their powerful, Muslim, and most importantly, pious rulers. Thank you.